If this happens, it could spark a new era for the Sith and the Force in Star Wars canon. So by now, most of you have probably made your opinion about what you think of Star Wars Acolyte. And personally, I am fairly critical of Star Wars The Acolyte as of right now. The series isn't exactly what I thought it would be, but there are a few elements to it that I do really enjoy, including the main villain of the series, or apparently the main villain, perhaps? That's a little bit of what I want to talk about today, or more specifically, who the Stranger, or Qimir, / the Master, truly is. So obviously this has sparked the question around the community, who truly is this character? When he's undercover, he went by the name Qimir, and now we know him as the Stranger, or the Master. He does say that he's sort of like a no one, he has no name, that he is recognized by the Jedi as a Sith, maybe, and yeah, that's pretty much all we know about the character. From the most recent episode, episode 6, we do have some hints and some indications that he might have had an earlier professional relationship with one of the Jedi Masters that we see in the series, be that Venestra or Soul or maybe someone else. But the series right now haven't done a great job at explaining or showing us why this character is doing what he is doing and who he truly is. So here is one possibility on who this character might be. So in this novel right here, this is the Darth Plagueis novel. What a beautiful novel this is. And I highly advise anyone who hasn't delved into Star Wars Legends, even if you're more interested in canon and Star Wars Acolyte, to read through this book, because it gives you great insight on the Force, Darth Plagueis as a character, Palpatine, the midichlorians, and so on and so forth. Beautiful, beautiful novel. But in this novel, and here's a little spoiler, there's an interaction between Darth Plagueis and a character named Venamis. And I think that there is a potential, given the timeline or the era of the Acolyte, that the Stranger could possibly be Venamis that we see in the Darth Plagueis novel, or that we read about. And by the way, I'm not the only one sharing this idea, and it's part of a larger speculation in the community, and I'm just further adapting it into my own little narrative of ideas. So if you don't know who Darth Venamis was, he was a character that was the secret apprentice of Darth Tenebrous, and Darth Tenebrous was Darth Plagueis' master. According to the Rule of Two, established by Darth Bane approximately 900 years before the events of Plagueis and Tenebrous and so on, the rule dictated, as many of you guys know, that there should only be a master and an apprentice. And Tenebrous decided to go away from this rule, as he chose to have Darth Plagueis as his apprentice, but secretly also train another person named Venamis. And after Tenebrous had been defeated by Darth Plagueis ends up in a confrontation with Venamis. The reason why the Stranger could possibly be Venamis is because he doesn't really portray the Dark Lord of the Sith attitude that you would expect from Darth Plagueis or Darth Tenebrous. And when we study his way of fighting, we know that he is incredibly effective, he's also very aggressive, and he can even levitate, which resembles almost the exact same characteristics that was described for Venamis in the Darth Plagueis novel. There's also the whole fact about the cortosis element going into play here. Darth Tenebrous and Darth Plagueis knew about a specific island where there was a lot of cortosis, and as we saw in Star Wars The Acolyte, we do see an island that's possibly filled with a lot of cortosis, and it so happened to be that one of the main villains used cortosis as part of their armor. So with a slight variation from Legends to canon, they could be implementing this element into the story of the Stranger, so that they eventually can reveal that he is Venomous and that he has associations with Darth Plagueis and Darth Tenebrous, or at the very least one of them. So when we think about the direction of the series a little bit, let's assume then that the Stranger, now revealed as Darth Venamis failed to make 𝐒𝐔𝐁𝐒 their apprentice, we could end up in a situation where he's faced with a confrontation against Darth Plagueis by the end of the series. In the novel, it doesn't take long before Darth Plagueis managed to defeat Venamis. The fight between the Stranger / Venamis and Darth Plagueis could spark a fascinating new era of Star Wars canon lore. And that's because, under the assumption that Darth Plagueis manages to defeat Venamis, which he should, Darth Plagueis could be set up to be the main villain for the second season of The Acolyte, if they eventually end up making it. But the way he defeats Venamis is not simply by killing him, no. He will use Venamis as a subject for experimentation on the nature of midichlorians and the Force, which is something that we saw in the Darth Plagueis novel. Because as you guys remember, in the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise, Darth Plagueis attempted to learn ways to cheat death. And in the Darth Plagueis novel, he goes into great lengths into studying various creatures and various species related to the Force in order to try and understand the ways of the midichlorians and overall how the Force can be manipulated so that Darth Plagueis can figure out a way to never die. This idea is very exciting, I think, and the potential that this could happen in Star Wars Acolyte is quite exciting, or at least very interesting. I'm not entirely sure if I trust them to make this right or make it good enough that it will at least honor the Legends material a little bit, because they clearly want to go in a different direction with canon for the most part and tell their own story. And another thing to mention, which is important, is that right now the canon and Legends timeline around Darth Plagueis, Tenebrous, and potentially Venamis is different between Legends and canon, meaning that their adaptation has to be a little bit different in terms of the timeline than what we see in a novel. Now, this is not the biggest issue or complication for that matter, but it's something to take into consideration when we are making the assumption that the Stranger could possibly be Venamis. But with that, I do think it's important to remember that they could also go an entirely different direction. The Stranger could end up being neither Tenebrous, Darth Plagueis, or Venamis. It could be an entirely different character. And supposedly, we are even meant to see one more 𝐒𝐓 appear in The Acolyte before the season is over, so we'll just have to wait and see who that may be and what that other 𝐒𝐓 will mean for the Stranger. But do let me know in the comment section below what you think about this theory. I think it's very interesting, I think it's possible, but is it very likely? I'm not entirely sure. I'm keeping myself reserved, but the possibility is there. And with that, remember, the Force is always with you.